Hello, my name is Paul and welcome back to my channel. This is going to be a weird video because I was going to make a video about Madam Web, then I realized it's not streaming yet, and then I was like, okay, I do not know what to make a video on, and then I reflected and I had a look through my notes and I realized I have never watched a movie from Lithuania. And you're probably like, who cares? Why would you want to watch movies from Lithuania? Well, if you do not know and if you've not watched my videos for a very long time, because I believe in my third ever video I've made on this channel, maybe it was my fourth, I don't know, I made a video where I talked about being Lithuanian and being a Lithuanian person in Ireland because I am Lithuanian, and I found it very strange that I've never actually engaged with Lithuanian media. I've never watched Lithuanian movies, I've never read Lithuanian poetry, I've never engaged in Lithuanian fiction. It's just very strange because this is a place I grew up in. I spent 7 or 8 years of my childhood there before I came over to Ireland. I made an entire video about this, so I'm not going to go into extreme detail, but I give you a little bit of information. So I came over here when I was 8, and my mum came over here when I was 7, so she left a year before me, then she brought me over, and I found the change very, very difficult. I found it very difficult to accept that I'm not in Lithuania anymore, but alongside that, I found it very difficult to accept myself. I know that sounds very, very corny, but it was just very weird. I always felt like there was this like anger towards foreign people in Ireland, and obviously that's just from my experience and from my family's experience, and I guess you just feel as if you're out of place, as if you're kind of like intruding on a culture, you're just intruding into somebody else's life, and I had that weird feeling for a very long time, and I feel like everyone who moves countries has that weird sort of guilt, and I have definitely got my fair share of it, and my mum definitely has, and we've had some negative experiences, and we've obviously had so many incredible experiences with people being extremely welcoming and just making us feel like we belong here. So, you know, so whenever I came over to Ireland, we used the name Paul, and I never actually used my proper name until I was 19, which is Pavel, because it was just embarrassing, it was difficult, it's just a whole thing, you know. I'm not really going to go into that. Just being foreign in Ireland was just, it's just a strange thing, and it was just quite a difficult thing for me to accept for a very, very long time. And now I'm obviously very proud of that. I love my name, I love everything about my history, everything that I grew up in, and I do really miss Lithuania because I've not been there in like 10 years, and I really want to explore Lithuanian art and Lithuanian media, and that's what I'm going to be doing today. I'm going to be watching my first ever Lithuanian movie, and I'm nervous, but I'm so excited because I have no excuse as like, why have I not done this for such a long time, and I'm so glad I'm finally doing it. It just never comes to mind. Like, I watch so many foreign movies, and I watch so many Eastern European movies, like I watch so many Russian movies, Polish movies, but I have never watched Lithuanian movies. Maybe it's because there's no like huge directors that I'm aware of from Lithuania, and no more excuses. Today's the day I watch my first Lithuanian movie. And what movie am I going to watch? Well, it's by a director called Jonas Mekas. I hope I'm saying his name correctly, because I don't think you pronounce J in Lithuanian. So I'm going to be watching his movie Reminiscences of a Journey to Lithuania, and it sounds absolutely perfect. I know nothing about this aside from the fact that it's a man, aka our director, going to Lithuania, and it's set in the countryside, which is very special because I grew up, a big part of my childhood was in the Lithuanian countryside, so I am so excited about this, but I'm also quite nervous because I'm going into it blind. I know nothing about this, and it's gonna be weird. I'm gonna go watch this movie, and we're going to talk about it after. So let's go watch Reminiscences of a Journey to Lithuania. Is that what it's even called? I don't even know. Wait, Reminiscences of a Journey to Lithuania. That's it. Right, let's go. Okay, hello. I have just finished watching Reminiscences of a Journey to Lithuania, and I have changed the microphone and the setup here. So basically I can kind of walk around and talk about this movie because I feel like I have quite a lot to say. I reacted the exact way I thought I would react to this movie slash documentary. I reacted in a very emotional slash, I was very, very drawn to this documentary. But what is this documentary about? Well, the first thing I need to say, as I've just said here, it is a documentary. It's not like a full feature length movie. It's not fictional, it's realistic, and it's based off the director's life, Jonas Mekas. I hope I'm saying his name correctly because Lithuanian names are quite difficult to pronounce. But basically this documentary is split into 3 parts. The first part is basically set in the director's director's life in New York in the 50s when he first got a camera. Then the second part is called 100 Glimpses of Lithuania, which is basically whenever after 25 or 27 years, I'm not exactly sure, it's whenever he goes back to Lithuania for the first time in a very, very long time. And the third part is set in a suburb of Hamburg, wherever he spent a year in a forced labor camp during the war, and it's extremely interesting. So I'm going to move through all the parts. I'm going to talk about them. Obviously, the second part, the part that I relate to the most, the part about Lithuania, that's kind of like most of the movie is like dedicated to that part, because it's like 50 minutes of just basically life in Lithuania. So I'm going to hone in on that part the most. But basically, the first part, we see him talking about life in New York, how he feels extremely displaced, how he's just very melancholic, and every time he just tries to live his life, normally there's just kind of like this layer of sadness beneath everything that's going on, because he feels displaced. He does not feel at home. It just feels wrong for him. He's not the only person that's been displaced, and just feels a little bit wrong because they miss their home. The documentary starts off with just a lot of very beautiful raw clips of Brooklyn, and these clips continue on throughout the entire documentary. The clips are very short, they're very raw, they feel extremely realistic, and it really captures life. Alongside these clips, we get a voiceover from the director who tells us about everything that's going on in his head, his attitudes towards living in New York, feeling not so much at home. And he says in a part where after 10 years of living there was just one moment whenever he was outside on a walk, he just felt right. And I found that extremely interesting, because it took the director 10 years to feel like he was at home in a sort of way, which is extremely interesting, because if you do not know, I feel like I've mentioned this at the start of the video, but whenever I arrived in Ireland, I found it very, very difficult to accept the fact that this is my home. And because it's just a difficult thing to process, because you've been moved from one place to another, either voluntarily or not voluntarily, and it's just a kind of a difficult thing to process and think about. I do empathize with that idea. Obviously, in my circumstance, we moved here because of different reasons than to the directors. The director had to basically move away from Lithuania. He was caught in Hamburg. He had to go to a labor camp. Then he was in a displaced center, and then he eventually moved to America. Like, his conditions were a lot different to mine. So obviously it's a weird comparison, but anyway. And I found it really interesting because he claims as a filmmaker, as a documentarian, he has this responsibility to educate people on the different ways of life, the way in Eastern Europe, how difficult the war has been on people, the effects war has had on people. So next we move on to the most important part of the documentary. That is the 100 glimpses of Lithuania. And oh my gosh, honestly, from the very first glimpse, which is kind of like a good few shots put together, from the very first glimpse, I was like, damn, I remember this so well. I found it really interesting because although this is set in the 70s, that feeling of being in the countryside in Lithuania has not changed. One word that you might need to know is dacha. Dacha is basically like a farmhouse. So our director goes back to see his mother that he's not seen in 25 years. Basically, the government were like, no, we're keeping track, you're not allowed to go see your family. But then he got quite famous because of his filmmaking, and then basically the government was like, yeah, you can go visit your family, even though he never really felt at home, which is kind of explored throughout these 100 glimpses. But anyway, from the very first glimpse at this countryside in Lithuania, it just brought me back. Everything, like just seeing it in the sunlight, seeing the clothes, seeing like the granny, seeing like even the specific flowers, the way the animals look, the way the roads look, it just really brought me back to whenever my granny and I would go to our dacha every week, and we would go for like a week at a time, sometimes 2 weeks, and we would just spend time there, you know, like farming or cleaning up the house or just taking care of the property and just basically living just a completely different life to a city life. Straight away, I felt very emotional watching it because I just remembered absolutely everything. And I know it's quite personal, but I'm still going to share it with you. We had to sell it. We had to sell the dacha, and watching this man visit his home after 25 years made me kind of like dive into my head and think of okay, would my life be like if I went back now? Because I have not been back in a very, very long time, about 8 or 9 years. And even if I wanted to, I couldn't go to that specific house. It just kind of sent me in this little spiral as I was watching this, and watching all these shots unravel and seeing like the attitudes of the granny and just how everybody reacts just brought me back. Like I could just smell the place. I could feel the sun that was coming through the screen at me. And even seeing things like gooseberries, like even the really, really outdated outdoor toilet. Like I still know that family members of mine still have those outdoor toilets, and I found it quite funny. But then I also just remember coming back from Ireland the first time and going to Lithuania, then going to visit my family, and they were like, yeah, the toilet's outside. I remember like, damn, this feels so weird, even though that was something I was used to whenever I did visit certain family members. And so, as I said, he goes back to see his mum that he's not seen in 25 years, and it's extremely emotional, and there's so much depth to documentary, but also seeing how things change while you're away. We see him say that, for example, whenever he left, the trees were super small, but now they have changed. He also reflects on relationships that he had while he was there. Whilst visiting his old school, he reflects on the fact that a lot of his friends that he went to school with are not there now, and he starts to imagine where they were, but also reflects on the time that they were together and they shared this friendship. And just he also reflects on the fact that in his head they're all still young whilst he is getting older. It also made me think, how would I react if I went back to Lithuania? Which I will, obviously, I really, really want to, but also just it just made me think, how would I view things now? Because the last time I was there, I was probably like 13 and 14, and I'm 25 now, and so obviously the way I look at things is extremely different. And for me, it just kind of made me view Lithuania in a different light, because my granny lives in Vilnius, which is the capital city, and obviously it's a city. It's completely different to the countryside. I feel like in Lithuania, the countryside has just not changed over the last 40 or 50 years. It just kind of feels like it's just stuck in time. So every time I think of Lithuania, I always think of it as kind of like this city where I just have a negative attitude towards it. I see grey skies, like very miserable people. But seeing Lithuania in this beautiful light, and see a family feel so much love and just share these special moments together in the place I was born, made me just reflect on the fact that I shouldn't be so negative towards this place. And it felt quite bittersweet, because obviously we left for a better life, but at the expense of a better life, you obviously are changing countries, you're changing cultures, you're obviously changing the relationships you're going to be having, and you're also just kind of like scraping your past, and you're just going to have to adapt to a brand new society. And that's obviously very difficult, especially for a child. So I found the contrast quite interesting, watching somebody who's a lot older than me, still feeling quite melancholic and emotional whilst being back in their home. Obviously a lot harder for him, because he physically couldn't go back, because he had no contact with his family. He wasn't allowed to. Yeah, it's a beautiful, beautiful documentary. And then the third part reflects on the fact that whenever he was trying to escape Lithuania because of the Germans and the Soviets were coming, he got caught and he had to be sent to a labor camp for a year, and then he was stuck in displacement camps before he could emigrate to America, which is very interesting. And I'm not really going to talk about that too much, because that's not kind of like the point of the video. The point of the video is me watching Lithuanian movies for the first time, and this director is absolutely incredible. If everything else that he makes is like this, then oh boy, I am gonna be watching more of his stuff, because that was so beautiful. I found the documentary form absolutely perfect for this, and the fact that there's just very little dialogue, it just captured the authentic life. It didn't feel forced. I found it quite funny, because everyone at the dacha in the countryside are looking at the camera like super awkwardly. They're like, I do not know what to do, which is funny, because if you were to film that now, it would be completely opposite. I just found it like things like that made it feel very honest and very authentic, which I absolutely loved. But it's also quite heartbreaking, because at the end he leaves Lithuania because he says like Lithuania is not the place for him, and he recognizes that and accepts that. So it's very difficult to watch him leave his family after he's not seen them in 25 years. And the thing I was thinking about at the end of this was, obviously he hasn't been back in 25 years, so he's leaving again, and whenever he comes back the next time, will, for example, his mother be dead? Will a lot of his friends be gone? What will change? And it's quite emotional because obviously you arrive home after such a long period of time, but you know your time is so finite and that it's going to run out very, very quick, and your days are literally numbered. And that must be a very difficult thing to process, because you just have to accept the fact that you're there for a few days and you're going to be gone again, and a lot of things could change. It's obviously quite sad, and it's obviously quite a lot to process, but overall that was absolutely beautiful. I loved this documentary so much. I'm going to be watching this man's work. I can't believe I've never watched this before. I love it so much. I know I keep repeating myself, but it's just a lot to process, especially just after watching this. I'm gonna watch more of his shorts, because I think he has like more like short movies that I'm gonna watch. Maybe I'll watch something else of his today, but I absolutely love that, and I'm glad I finally watched it. So I think that's everything I have to say. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.